When it comes to coasters, you got the good and the bad. But how do we decide which coasters we'll put on a golden platform and which ones we're gonna send to the dumpster? Because I mean, it's all just opinions, right? But coaster enthusiasts go so in depth that they hype up certain elements on coasters and ditch others. But every once in a while, when you're expecting average to nothing, an element can absolutely blow your socks off. These are incredible moments taken for granted. They're forgotten about and overshadowed by all the other elements we hype up. You rarely hear them discussed, but today, I'm going to put an end to that. These are my top 5 most underrated elements I've ever experienced. When most people think of El Toro, 4 moments generally come to mind. The drop, the double camelbacks, and of course the ejector-filled rolling thunderhail. And while these are all amazing elements, El Toro is so much more than just 4 ejector airtime moments. It's full of strong positives and laterals as well. Most noticeably in the rapid-fire bank turns finale. These elements absolutely shocked me on my first rides on El Toro. They're easily the most forceful part of the coasters, and it all starts with the rolling thunderhail. The pullout from this hill is super intense and forceful. I'm willing to bet that if you have your hands in the air, this pullout will push them down onto your lap bar. I think this moment feels so intense because of how drastically the forces are changing. Think about it. You just went from one of the strongest airtime moments of all time to some of the strongest positives on the entire coaster. I was also pleasantly surprised that the same amount of force was maintained throughout every single turn. Not to mention, you get some sharp lats on the transitions. These are some of my favorite elements on the coaster, and they deserve way more love. X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain is a longtime favorite of mine. With its disorienting flips and forceful transitions, this coaster is one of the most intense rides I've ever been on. And while this coaster gets very mixed reviews by enthusiasts, everyone seems to give credit to the crazy drop and the outside Raven turn. However, I never hear anybody talk about the massive inside Raven turn, and honestly, that kinda shocks me. I know it doesn't have the bone-crushing intensity of X2's other elements, but its fun factor easily makes up for it. After the forceful pullout from the first drop, X2 flies up into this crazy element. You ascend this Raven turn with your back parallel to the track all the way until you're staring face first at the ground. When you're at the top, it actually feels a lot higher than you really are. And right when it looks like you're about to nosedive, the trains flip into a sitting position as your face gets hit by a huge gust of wind and straight into a backflip, which actually flows quite well. Additionally, before I became an enthusiast, this was by far my favorite element of the ride, just because of how fun it is. If that doesn't tell you this element is underrated, then I'm not sure what to tell you. Ah yes, KingsDominionTV, or as I like to call it, the GP's #1 coaster. But all jokes aside, this entire coaster is super underrated. While it does have a slight rattle, the crazy intensity easily makes up for it. And yes, the restraints are annoying, but they are required by New Jersey state law. Anyway, I'm getting a little off track. The moment I want to talk about is the launch. And I know this is the most talked about element on KingsDominionTV, but it's still not discussed nearly enough. You slowly roll out of the station until you get to the launch track, and you're just forced to sit there and wait. This builds up a crazy amount of suspense. And suddenly you hear the fins drop as they release that long shh sound that we all love. The trains roll back into place, and before you can even brace yourself, you are shot off like a freaking bullet. Your entire body is pasted to the backrest for the whole time, unlike other launches like Accelerator and Full Throttle. Perhaps my favorite part is when you're halfway down the launch track, and it feels like the launch slows up for a second, and then it shoots you off to top speed again. When you're at the end of the launch, you're going so fast that you can actually hear the same wind sounds that you hear in bad quality POVs. Yeah, this launch is extremely underrated, and I have a very hard time actually wrapping my head around what could possibly be more intense than this. Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain is a great RMC full of ejector airtime and strong laterals, but in the coaster community, it's more well known for its infamous dueling aspect, if you know what I mean. But for real, this coaster has quite a few elements that receive a lot of attention, like the Top Gun stall, or the high five element. And yeah, these elements are all fun and all, but I still can't understand why the most powerful airtime moment on the entire ride is hardly ever mentioned. I'm talking about the massive step-ups before the high five. Twisted Colossus is generally known for being an RMC with some of the strongest airtime, but I swear I am not exaggerating when I say this step-up has airtime almost equally as strong as the Rolling Thunder Hill. So after the drop's decently intense pullout, you hit a small bunny hill that gives surprisingly strong ejector. Still maintaining most of the speed from the first drop, the train starts to transition into the step-up. Strong positives then push you into your seat and force your back to hurl over until, boom, you get absolutely launched for what feels like 3 or 4 seconds. This airtime moment is best experienced near the front rows, since the back of the train shoves you into this hill at full speed, leading to some ridiculous ejector airtime. And perhaps the most awesome part is that Twisted Colossus, more than any other coaster I've ever ridden, speeds up like crazy throughout the day. So if you get a night ride, well, you guys already know how I feel about that. In conclusion, this is easily one of my favorite elements I've ever experienced, and if it wasn't for one amazing ride I got in the next coaster, this would easily take the #1 spot. However, I did get that amazing ride. To quickly recap, we've covered Ka's launch, El Toro's Twister finale, Twisted Colossus's massive step-ups, and X2's huge inside Raven turn. And I'm sure you're getting tired of me saying this, but I love each and every one of these moments, and just because they're not #1 doesn't mean I love them any less. But unless you're that random enthusiast I saw on my last trip to Magic Mountain, I can guarantee you will not pick the #1 spot. But nevertheless, the most underrated element I've ever had the fortune to experience is Viper's batwinging corkscrews. And wait, before you go to the comment section and rage, please let me explain this. All you have to do is pull down your restraint so that it touches your shoulders pretty firmly, so that there is zero headbanging whatsoever, and I mean it. And yes, Viper does have those old arrow transitions, but since your restraint is on your shoulders, there is nowhere for it to go, even in the roughest moments. Anyway, with that all aside, the amount of hang time these elements give is just something else. You do have to sit in the back row, but that's never a big deal because this ride gets no wait whatsoever. And I never thought I'd say this, but it's all thanks to the really harsh mid-course brake run. This thing slows you to a complete stop. As you slowly gather momentum down the nearly flat drop off the mid-course, you watch the front of the train barely make it into the batwing, but then you just sit there upside down for a freaking eternity. This is one of the greatest hang time moments I've ever experienced. Right until the train, absolutely out of nowhere, whips you down the bottom of the inversion, giving some very intense positives, and then you do the exact same thing, except on the other side of the batwing. Again, giving crazy hang time and crazy whip. At this point, Viper had already become the most underrated coaster I've ever ridden, but then you hit the final corkscrews, and I have never been so pleasantly surprised by such a basic element. These give better hang time than hang time at Knott's. Also, did I mention that this entire portion doesn't have a single bad transition? Yeah, not even one. I don't know what Magic Mountain did to this, but they sure did do a great job. In fact, this finale was so awesome that it bumped Viper all the way into my top 5 coasters at Magic Mountain. These are hands down the #1 most underrated elements I've ever experienced, and to be honest, it's not even very close. Also, fun fact, before the refurbishment, Viper didn't used to trim very hard, and that's part of the reason why I didn't even put it in my top 10 last time. That and the fact that the transitions were way worse. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm not being cliche when I say that, because this video took me like 3 days to edit, one of which was just spent on the intro, so I really do hope it paid off. So if you enjoy roller coaster content similar to this, then make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon so you'll be notified every time I post a video. please consider dropping a like on this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!